Anyone who hears the name Wilhelm II automatically thinks of the German Emperor Wilhelm II, who ruled until November 1918, and who also held the title of King of Prussia. But the one I'm talking about now was indeed a namesake of the Hohenzollern, but he ruled as King Wilhelm II of Württemberg. He was born in Stuttgart on February 25, 1848, as the son of Prince Friedrich of Württemberg, a nephew of the reigning king, and Princess Katharina, a daughter of King Wilhelm I of Württemberg. Since the marriage of his uncle, Crown Prince Karl, who was attracted to men, remained childless with his wife Olga of Württemberg, young Wilhelm was seen early on as the future heir to the throne, and was prepared for this accordingly. From 1854, since the age of 6, he was educated until the age of 12 by the candidate of theology and later pastor Karl Günther, a religious teacher at a Stuttgart high school, who also confirmed Wilhelm, who was promoted to lieutenant in 1863 that same year. It is remarkable that Wilhelm, during these years of study, also received vocational training in carpentry and bookbinding, through which he gained insight into the hardships and concerns of the common man during those important formative years. After that, until 1865, Captain Link took the place of the civilian teacher, who would later become the Royal Württemberg Lieutenant General Karl von Link. On June 25, 1864, at the age of 82, Wilhelm's grandfather, King Wilhelm I of Württemberg, passed away in Cannstatt. He had followed his grandson's development with great interest throughout his life, and on the occasion of his confirmation in 1863, gave him a long handwritten letter in which he admonished him never to forget that he was there for the sake of the people, not that the people were there for his sake. In the fall of 1865, Prince Wilhelm began a general studies program at the Eberhard Karls University in Tübingen, but it was interrupted just a year later. From June 14th to August 23rd, 1866, the German War raged, in which the Kingdom of Württemberg sided with the Austrian Empire against the Kingdom of Prussia. Lieutenant Wilhelm von Württemberg then joined the 2nd Württemberg Ulan Regiment, King Wilhelm No. 20, on June 21, 1866, which was renamed the Ulan Regiment King, Wilhelm I No. 20, in 1874. During the war, he served on the staff of the 1st Württemberg Field Division and under Lieutenant General von Hadeck. The 8th Federal Corps, formed from the contingents of Württemberg, Baden, and Hesse, with a strength of around 35,000 men, and General of the Infantry, Prince Alexander von Hessen-Darmstadt, fought against the Prussian Main Army and Lieutenant General Edwin von Manteuffel. On July 24, 1866, the battle at Tauberbischofsheim took place, in which the Württemberg Division, under von Hadeck, encountered the Prussian 13th Division under the command of General August Karl von Goeben, and was defeated by them. During this, the mounted staff of Lieutenant General von Hadeck, while observing from a hill, came under heavy Prussian fire, during which the 32-year-old Captain Ferdinand Hofmeister, riding next to the prince marked with the blue dot, was mortally wounded. This tragic experience was one of the reasons why Wilhelm did not have a strong inclination toward military life. During the war, he was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Württemberg Military Merit Order, one of the highest German awards for bravery, which, for example, was only awarded 2,289 times during the First World War, and almost exclusively to people from Württemberg. After Austria's defeat in September 1st, 1866, Prince Wilhelm resumed his studies, but now to broaden his horizons at a North German university, the Georg August University in Göttingen, where over the next 2 years he especially studied the so-called cameral sciences, as the subjects were called at that time that were intended to provide future civil servants with the necessary knowledge in administration. His studies were repeatedly interrupted by service at the headquarters of the Württemberg army. Here is their flag. But in addition to lectures, student beer halls, and the occasional military service, which, according to his own account, only occupied him for 10 minutes a day, the young prince also enjoyed life to the fullest. He left evidence of this in many of the 600 letters he wrote to two fellow students from his days in Göttingen, his close friends Detlev von Plato and Gottfried von Reden. It is said that Wilhelm fell madly in love with Marie Bartling in Göttingen, whom he called Mimi, the daughter of the respected biology professor Friedrich Gottlieb Bartling. During a visit home, he tearfully begged his domineering mother to approve his marriage to the middle-class Marie. After all, this secret relationship had lasted for about 8 years. But Katharina von Württemberg had categorically rejected his wish and instead sent him on a journey. First, he went to Italy, where he supposedly had an illegitimate child, then to Sweden, from where Wilhelm wrote to his friends. The women were quite acceptable, mainly because you could converse, or perhaps mainly only in the language that everyone understands. In Göttingen, Wilhelm was active in the Primancia fraternity, which remained a dueling fraternity until 1971. After he transferred to the Eberhard Karls University of Tübingen in 1868 for further studies, especially in law. For a year, he frequented the Suevia Tübingen fraternity there, which also remained a dueling fraternity until 1971 as a Kohn-Knepon, which is what a member of a student fraternity with limited rights and duties is called, and he remained loyal to both fraternities as an alumnus. Then, on April 1, 1869, Wilhelm joined the Prussian 1st Foot Guards Regiment in Potsdam, where he was also promoted to first lieutenant. He was accompanied by the personal adjutant of King Karl, who had sent his nephew, the Württemberg cavalry captain, Count von Zeppelin, along with him, the later general of the cavalry and developer of the Zeppelin airships. Later, as king, Wilhelm significantly supported him, especially the very morning. During the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, the prince was awarded the Iron Cross Second Class on September 2, 1870, and was assigned to the headquarters of the Third Army under Crown Prince Friedrich Wilhelm of Prussia. The death of the two sons of the Württemberg Minister of Foreign Affairs, Count Adolf von Taube, Erich and Axel von Taube, as volunteer hunters in the Battle of Villiers on September 2nd and 4th, 1870, deeply shook Prince Wilhelm, and once again it proved to him the senselessness of wars fought over trivial border disputes between European states. After the war, he was awarded an honorary Doctor of Law degree by the University of Tübingen, received the Prussian Order of the Black Eagle in 1872, and in the same year, as a cavalry captain, took command of the 4th Squadron of the Guard Hussar Regiment stationed in Potsdam, which from 1888 was called the Life Guard Hussar Regiment. In 1873, he was promoted to major in both the Royal Prussian and Royal Württemberg armies, and from August 15, 1874 to June 25, 1875, he served as commander of the Guard Hussar Regiment. During this time, he was also promoted to lieutenant colonel. In 1875, however, Wilhelm left the Prussian army and rejoined the Württemberg army, where King Karl appointed him as colonel of all the suite. This entitled him to wear the regimental uniform, but without holding an official position. However, the king was not at all pleased with his nephew's decision to leave the Prussian army. But the truth was also that Wilhelm never really felt comfortable in the uniform, and only his sense of duty as a future monarch had motivated him to get practical experience in this part of public service as well. Then, after another trip to Italy that took him as far as Naples, he became engaged on November 18, 1876, in Orelsan, to the 19-year-old Princess Marie of Waldeck-Pyrmont. They were married on February 15, 1877. This union had definitely been a love match. At first, the couple moved into the Stuttgart Crown Prince's Palace and spent their first summer in Seefeld, Tyrol. However, after Wilhelm took command of the 27th Württemberg Cavalry Brigade in Stuttgart on June 3, 1877, the couple moved in 1878 to a relatively modest neoclassical estate at 51 Heilbronner Street in Ludwigsburg, which was named Marienval. In December 1877, the first child was born, Princess Pauline, who 21 years later, in 1898, married Friedrich Hermann, hereditary Prince of Wied. After Wilhelm was promoted to Major General in 1879, he left the army at his own request on July 12, 1882. The reason for this had been several strokes of fate that had befallen the universally beloved prince in Marienwald. Thus, his son Ulrich, born on July the 28th, 1880, had already died here of dysentery, together with his older sister Pauline on December 28, 1880. And Wilhelm's wife Marie died at the age of 24 on April 30th, 1882, during the stillbirth of a daughter who remained unnamed. Wilhelm, who had remained in the reserve of commanders after leaving active service, was appointed lieutenant general on December 6, 1883, and on September 24, 1888, he became a general of the cavalry à la suite of the 19th Ulan Regiment King Karl. 4 years after the death of his first wife Marie, Prince Wilhelm remarried on April 8, 1886, in Buckeberg, to the 21-year-old Princess Charlotte of Schaumburg-Lippe. However, this marriage can rather be seen as a marriage of convenience, to give his young daughter Pauline a new mother. His marriage to Charlotte remained childless. However, rumors soon began to circulate that Wilhelm had taken a great interest in the wife of his best friend, Detlev von Plato, with everything that entailed. On April 20th, 1889, when Prince Wilhelm was riding in a carriage in Ludwigsburg with his 12-year-old daughter Pauline, the tanner's apprentice Martin Müller fired a pistol shot at them, but missed the carriage. Müller was immediately arrested and later declared insane by a court and sent to an institution. His job title, Rotgerber or Logerber, was derived from the now more or less vanished craft of Logerberei, a special form of tanning cattle hides. On October 6, 1891, King Karl died in Stuttgart after a long illness. Here is the funeral procession in Stuttgart on October 9th. After that, Prince Wilhelm, at 43 years old, ascended the throne as King Wilhelm II of Württemberg, thus ending the previously led, dissolute lifestyle. In his throne speech, he described his future work as a ruler as follows: within the fatherland, the pursuit of steady, prudent progress in all areas of state life will be the focus of my constant efforts. And those were not just empty political promises, keyword turning point, but he also acted accordingly during his 27-year reign. During these years, Württemberg presented the image of an exemplary governed constitutional monarchy, in which, so to speak, all branches of state life flourished. The king took care of everything within the framework of the Constitution that his competent advisors brought to his attention. Insightful and modest, Wilhelm II of Württemberg, like hardly any other ruler of his time, knew how to win people over. He always spent the summer months in Babenhausen, or Friedrichshafen, and his countrymen were pleased when their king met them in simple civilian clothes, accompanied only by his 2 dogs, Ali and Ruby. When the First World War broke out on August 1st, 1914, Wilhelm did not share the general euphoria and did not take on any military role, even though Emperor Wilhelm II had appointed him honorary field marshal on the occasion of his 25th throne anniversary on October 6, 1916. Nevertheless, King Wilhelm II repeatedly visited his Württemberg troops deployed at the front, among whom, in the Württemberg Mountain Battalion on the Isonzo front, served someone who would later become very famous, First Lieutenant Erwin Rommel. On April 4, 1917, the king visited the front at Schenn, north of the Argonne, with General Adolf Franke, commander of the 2nd Württemberg Landwehr Division. But a matter close to Wilhelm's heart was also the care for the families of fallen Württemberg soldiers. When the military collapse became apparent in the fall of 1918, this filled him with great concern, but he had not expected the fall of the monarchy. But the events hit him all the harder when, on the morning of November 9th in Stuttgart, a demonstration supported by the Social Democratic Party of Germany and the semi-communist Social Democratic Party of Germany, the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany, formed on the Schlossplatz. There, the former Drexler journalist and now Social Democratic Party of Germany politician Wilhelm Keil proclaimed a social Württemberg Republic. During the war, the politically flexible Keil, who served as chairman of the Social Democratic Party of Germany parliamentary group in the Stuttgart State Parliament from 1919 to 1933, had stated the following: "With a unanimity that has rarely prevailed in major issues concerning the party, the Social Democratic workers of Germany take the self-evident position that, in the great alliances of nations, it is in their own best interest to prevent the horrors of an enemy invasion and to wish for and help bring about the victory of German arms." Then there was an incited crowd, mainly foreign sailors and, quoting an observer, young, immature people, boys and especially girls of 15 and 16 years old. And many soldiers with broken rifles entered the Wilhelm Palace, the king's residence on Neckar Street, and there they replaced the royal standard with a red cloth. When the officer on duty, Reserve Lieutenant Bosch, resisted, he was beaten up. The Rotbuhl barracks had also been stormed, and the armories of the Grenadier Regiment Queen, Olga No. 119, and the Infantry Regiment Kaiser Friedrich King of Prussia. No. 125 had been broken open, and all movable property was stolen. Prisoners were freed, and documents were destroyed. Wilhelm II, after the Minister of the Interior, Ludwig von Köhler, had declared that there should be no bloodshed over his person, was then brought with his wife and an escort to his hunting lodge in Babenhausen on the evening of November 9th, which from then on was to be his main residence, and where he, quote, described himself as no longer in office, but without having formally abdicated. A few days later, the provisional government of what was now called the People's State of Württemberg, which would exist until 1933 under the Prime Minister, the 69-year-old journalist Wilhelm Bloss, approved the financial settlement for Wilhelm II that had been negotiated by the previous Prime Minister, Dr. Karl von Weizsäcker. In it, he was granted the protection of his private property, lifelong residence rights for him and the Queen at Babenhausen Monastery, as well as an annual pension of 200,000 marks. Then on November 30th, 1918, King Wilhelm II of Württemberg, after 27 years of reign, laid down the crown and assumed the title of Duke of Württemberg. When the waves of the revolution had subsided, the old affection of all classes of the population for their abdicated king had also returned. But Duke Wilhelm of Württemberg wanted nothing more to do with the people of Stuttgart, where the revolt had begun on November 9th. He simply had not forgiven that, in November 1918, not a single hand had been raised there to protect him. This contempt had gone so far, as he wrote on March the 14th, 1920, to Field Provost Otto Blum, the former garrison chaplain of Stuttgart. I was at the grave of my wife and my child. I drove in a wide circle around Stuttgart, not out of bitterness, but because I feel that I no longer belong there. I never want to set foot in Stuttgart again, not even when I am transferred to my final resting place in Ludwigsburg. Later, Theodor Pfitzer, who served as mayor of Ulm from 1948 to 1972, described the Württemberg Revolution in this way. The monarchy's end was a turning point, but not a major break in the state's and capital's development. The men of the new era, like the Social Democrats Bloss and Kiel, were not inclined toward extremes. Württemberg did not require a significant attitude change. The loyal conservative citizens of the state were, like the king, tolerant and politically liberal, just as their fathers were, even if they voted conservative. People remained loyal to the Reich, even though they often complained about the Prussians and forgot that behind the desks and counters in Württemberg sat South Prussians. They enforced the laws to the letter, laws that were conceived in Berlin and laughed at in Bavaria. However, almost parallel to the Berlin Spartacist uprising, there was also an uprising in Stuttgart from January 4th to 12th, 1919, supported by the Independent Social Democratic Party of Germany. However, it was suppressed by the security forces organized by former Lieutenant Paul Hahn, resulting in deaths and injuries. And the second attempt by Spartacus, from March 31st to April 10th, 1919, to seize power, had also failed. Because when around 400 armed Spartacists entrenched themselves on the Wangener Höhe and at Adelsberg and opened fire on what is now Ulmer Street in Stuttgart, they were attacked and dispersed by Württemberg units, including with artillery. 17 people were killed and around 50 wounded in the process. When Duke Wilhelm of Württemberg, who during his lifetime had been honored with all the knightly orders of the German states and numerous highest orders from abroad, died on October 2nd, 1921 at the age of 73, the whole country mourned. And although, according to his wishes, he wanted to be buried quietly in the Ludwigsburg cemetery next to his first wife and his son, more than 100,000 mourners arrived on special trains on October 7th. What was mortal of Wilhelm was then transferred in a funeral procession from his residence at Babenhausen Monastery to Villa Marienwall in Ludwigsburg. However, clearly bypassing Stuttgart via Böblingen, Vaihingen, Bottnang, Feuerbach, and Zuffenhausen. At the cemetery, at 11 o'clock, with all the bells ringing, a, quote, tremendous funeral procession set itself in motion. First, the Protestant clergy of the Ludwigsburg district, then Bishop Dr. Paul Wilhelm von Kepler, the officials, and the servants of the former royal court, the forestry officials, the chief court marshal Alfred Schenk, Count von Stauffenberg, and at the end, the hearse drawn by 6 black horses. Accompanied on both sides by the former chamberlains and generals of the former Württemberg army, also accompanied by many who had cowardly abandoned Wilhelm II in November 1918. The ceremony started at the old cemetery when the bell tolled at noon. After the eulogy by Pastor Paul Stadelmann, senior court preacher prelate Dr. Konrad Hoffmann blessed the body with these words, "Now we lay the weary body of our last king in the earth, at the side of his first wife, near the delicate bud of their child. We rest according to his wish. We thank God that we were allowed to have him, the humble and kind, the noble and simple." And his daughter Pauline, Princess Wide, here second from the right with her father standing between her sons, wrote 10 years after his passing, "And if he still lives on in his people today, the reason is not that he was the king of Württemberg, but because he was a human being." But anyone who now wants to visit Wilhelm's grave to remember him will be misled. Because, as the Stuttgart historian Harold Schukraft has established, since the restoration work carried out years ago, there is something on the grave. Above the coffin of King Wilhelm II, there is now the gravestone of his first wife, Princess Marie, and on her coffin is the gravestone of Wilhelm's second wife, Queen Charlotte, while on Charlotte's is the king's gravestone. Pure confusion. Because actually, Wilhelm's gravestone should be in the back left, but to place it in the center of the family grave, they moved his stone, which means that every grave is now incorrectly labeled. But in closing, I would like to remember a Duke of Württemberg who lived in the best tradition of his ancestors, close to the people, humorous, modest, and patriotic, to Colonel of the Reserve, Friedrich Duke of Württemberg. I got to know and appreciate him during several commanders' conferences. On May 9, 2018, Duke Friedrich was killed in a fatal accident with his vintage Porsche, and was buried on the 25th in the presence of 2,000 people, escorted by the Yellow Hussars from Althausen and other local militias from the region. Representatives of the Bundeswehr were not seen at the burial of one of their high-ranking reserve officers.